Hello again. Friends, just as we get started today, I feel like we've done some centering. I feel like you're ready. You ready? Be connected to your breath if you need to reconnect with your breath. But to start us today, I wanted to let you in on a little secret. Okay? So if you just lean in a little bit. The secret is this. The secret is that all the preachers that I know, whatever we preach on Sunday, whatever we're exploring, talking about, wrestling with, we're really preaching to ourselves. That's it. That's the secret, that really whatever we're talking about is something that we know we need to hear. And you all just get to listen in as we essentially talk to ourselves for however amount of time that it is. No, that's not the full picture. I mean, there definitely is okay, how do we listen to what God is saying, what is happening in our community, what's happening in the wider world, and how can we grow together? But there is some significant truth that whatever it is that I am talking about on any given Sunday, it's what I need to hear. And where we're headed in our Chunk of Change series for this month of October. Today is October. Did you know that? Wow. Where we're headed, we are going down a path that I know that I need help in, that I know I need to grow in, and I hear God nudging us to grow in it together as individuals and as a community as well. Because this month we are walking down the path of compassion. Part of why we choose this path now is because, well, look around, right? And frankly, given your lack of definitions from the beginning of the service, I feel like we need to talk about compassion. Good job, Philip's family. But what our world needs now is love, and not just love, sweet love, but really needs compassion, actual compassion. Compassion in these conversations around NFL players taking a knee and what the larger conversation is around racial injustice and reconciliation. Compassion in how we respond to the desperate hurricane devastation in Houston, in the Virgin Islands, and especially in Puerto Rico. Compassion for our brothers and sisters to the south as they recover from the earthquake in Mexico City. What the world needs now is compassion. And maybe, like me, you sense this is an area that you can grow in. You see, the word compassion, it does often feel warm and fuzzy, like a word like love or affection or mercy, but it is something of great cost. As we heard, well defined over here, that compassion means being with suffering, or to suffer with. Being with suffering. So did anyone else come up with something like that? Were you in that same realm? I see you nodding back there, Catherine. Okay, yeah. So what I did not know previously, so I'd also heard the Henry Nouwen definition, and John Philip Newell says being with suffering, just a slightly different way of saying it, which I like as well. What I didn't know previously about compassion is that there's such similarity between the word compass and compassion. And like you put them next to each other, you're like, well, yeah. I mean, it's like the same word. But John Philip Newell, in his book, The Rebirthing of God, he talks about this connection. He points out how they share an etymological root. And when we say compass, compassion too, to see them up there. The earliest use of the word compass, it doesn't refer to like the northeast, southwest, I'm going hiking and I need a compass kind of compass. The word that what it's actually used to describe is this kind of compass, which was used mathematically to measure distance. It's a two-pronged device measuring distance between 2 points. So get this, the related word, compassion, is about honoring the relationship between 2 points. Between two people, or between one group and another. It's about making the connection between the heart of my being and the heart of your being, and following that connection, even when the distance seems too far or too foreign or too painful or too different from where I am standing to where you are. Isn't that a powerful, helpful image? So for October, we're going to live into this image, one to hold alongside what the Jesus story tells us then about compassion, about being with suffering. And although compassion, it's not a linear process, John Philip Newell has helpful language for this. He talks about the way of compassion as being threefold. So the compassionate way is the courage to see, the courage to feel, the courage to act. So see, feel, act, which seems kind of straightforward, but we're going to spend some time working through how these are also very, very hard too. So this threefold path of compassion, it's a way that we read Jesus embodying. He does this throughout the Gospels. I actually snuck it in last week. If you were here last week or if you watched or listened, we listened last week using the practice of Lectio Divina to a passage of Scripture. And if you were here, you heard this text last week. I want to just read the first half of it again. So if you were here, it'll have that nice, ooh, yeah, this is familiar. And just notice, though, hear it differently. Notice how Jesus sees, feels, and acts in this text. So this is what we heard last week from Luke 7:11 through 17. So not long after that, Jesus went to the village Nain. His disciples were with him, along with quite a large crowd. As they approached the village gate, they met a funeral procession. A woman's only son was carried out for burial, and the mother was a widow. When Jesus saw her, his heart broke. He said to her, "Don't cry." Then he went over and touched the coffin. The pallbearers stopped. He said, "Young man, I tell you, get up." The dead son sat up and began talking. Jesus presented him to his mother. When Jesus saw her, his heart broke. And if you were here last week, it's nice to hear it again, right? If you were here last week, then you may have noticed how Levi, who was sitting over here, he's like, "Man, I just noticed how Jesus has so much compassion here." And I was like, "Well, yes, he does. Good segue, Levi." But you can see how Jesus used the compass. He saw the connection. Then he felt, he acted. To see, feel, act, compassion. So we're going to explore this threefold path, one aspect at a time, beginning today, a path that takes courage to see, to feel, to act with those who suffer. I know, right? You ready? I know. Yeah. You want to suffer? Okay, let's go do it. Okay. So today we're going to look at the courage to see compassionately. So as we dive in, please be sure to hang on to that S hook if you got one on your way in. We are just using this as a practice all through this series, using it as a prayer stone of sorts to have on hand as we spend this time together, remembering that there are hooks, opportunities for growth that come at us, that get our attention. And so we're mindful just to listen for what God is saying to us in this exploration on this path together. So the courage to see compassionately. What does this mean? So let's dive into another example of Jesus seeing with compassion in Matthew's telling of Jesus feeding thousands of people with 7 loaves of bread and a few fish. So this is Matthew 15:29 through 38. But again, let's listen through that lens of compassion. I'll have Amanda come on up and read it for us today.
Okay, is this thing on? Yes. Okay. Matthew 15:29 through 39. Jesus left there and went along the Sea of Galilee. Then he went up on a mountainside and sat down. Great crowds came to him, bringing the lame, the blind, the crippled, the mute, and many others, and laid them at his feet, and he healed them. The people were amazed when they saw that the mute were speaking, the crippled made well, the lame walking, and the blind seeing. And they praised the God of Israel. Jesus called his disciples to him and said, "I have compassion for these people. They have already been with me for 3 days and have nothing to eat. I do not want to send them away hungry, or they will collapse along the way." His disciples answered, "Where could we get enough bread in this remote place to feed such a crowd?" "How many loaves do you have?" Jesus asked. 7, they replied, "and a few small fish." He told the crowd to sit down on the ground. And then he took the 7 loaves and the fish, and when he had given thanks, he broke them and gave them to his disciples, and they in turn to the people. They all ate and were satisfied. And afterwards, the disciples picked up the 7 basketfuls of broken pieces that were left over. The number of those who ate was 4,000 men, besides women and children. After Jesus had sent the crowd away, He got into a boat and went to the vicinity of Magadan.
Thank you. Always there's so much to say about this fairly miraculous moment and what it speaks about who God is and who we are. But let's just drill into what Jesus's response is here. What does Jesus say as he looks out over the crowd? He says, I have compassion for these people. They have already been with me 3 days and have nothing to eat. I do not want to send them away hungry, or they may collapse on the way. So if we've read this passage before, this doesn't surprise us. Of course, Jesus has compassion. Of course he does. And of course he's going to feed these people. That's what he does, right? But if we step back from the familiarity of it and notice with me that Jesus did not say, guys, I'm hungry. I feel like that would be an appropriate response, right? Like, guys, I'm kind of starving. I've been doing some really cool stuff right here. A lot of hard work. Feeling a little faint. Can someone go find me a sandwich? I feel like that would actually be a very appropriate thing to say because I don't know about you, but I have been hangry before, right? But Jesus connected his own hunger because surely he was hungry. He connected his own hunger to the hunger of the crowd. He saw them. To see them meant making that connection between his own needs and their needs. From this text, then, as we consider the courage to see with compassion, I only just want to make one big, bold, somewhat obvious point for us this morning when it comes to seeing with compassion, and just see what God does with this one thing. And it's this. It's that compassion on the screen. Do it. Yeah, compassion happens in close proximity. It happens when we're close, right? Because if compassion means being with suffering, to suffer with, as Shepard said so beautifully, we need to get into their shoes. You can't have compassion unless you're actually standing close enough to be with the suffering, right? Close enough to see, and that ain't easy. That's why we're intentionally using this word courage. The courage to see really means the courage to get close enough to see. You can't see someone or a group or a community if you don't move toward them. What has happened in your own life when you have stepped towards suffering, the suffering of someone else? There are times like Jesus here where we will discover that compass connection with someone else who is in fact having the same sort of suffering that we have or have had before. Oh, you're hungry just like I'm hungry. There's this connection, which really does make a connection when we see something that we have experienced too. Like when we have survived a breakup and we walk alongside with a box of tissues and the box of chocolates with a friend who's like surviving their own breakup. When we have lost a loved one, when we stand beside a friend as they work through their own grief. When our kid is finally sleeping through the night and we become like the biggest cheerleaders to those new parents as they try to survive newborn week, right? It's like, you can do it. Like, there is an end in sight. But God does amazing work in these kinds of situations when people are willing to have compassion, to be with suffering, and stand there and quietly say, yeah, me too. Have you also experienced times, though, when the suffering is not something that you have actually experienced yourself? God also does incredible things when people step toward unfamiliar suffering. As I reflect on that in my own life, for me, the great example in my life is the unfamiliar suffering that I had with my friend Josh. So the first few days of my freshman year of college, so freshman year, Pacific Lutheran University in Tacoma, woo, go Lutz. Hinderley Hall, if you're curious, is where I was. So my roommate and I, we became really good buddies with some Nick and Josh who lived on the same floor, but at the other end of the dorm. We became really good friends. And then right before Thanksgiving, Josh came out as gay. And he had told a number of our friends, but then we sat with him holding his hands when he called his parents to tell them. And his folks were awesomely supportive, which was just beautiful to like cry and be in that moment with them. But this was new territory for me. So I'd never had openly gay friends before, and I had also just not received much, I guess I would call it moral instruction on what I should think about someone who is gay or lesbian. And I had such the rich privilege then of being able to ask Josh like all the questions, just to make sense of this. It's like, okay, wait, so you're a guy, but you're attracted to guys. Okay. So what about that guy over there? What about him? What about him? Like, okay, wait, but your roommate's a guy. How does that work? And when you're attracted to guys, and like, so just, Josh was so gracious with my obtuseness, for which I am so grateful. But beyond my curiosity, just like, wow, how does this work? Like the curiosity around being gay, I had a whole new way of just looking at my college campus as well as just the wider culture. I began to notice the kinds of jokes that were made about LGBT folks, because this was almost 20 years ago. I began to notice how prevalent stories of LGBT folks as victims of hate crimes made the evening news. I noticed how Josh wasn't welcome to the parties and events that some of the Christian groups on campus would throw. I noticed how Josh wanted to get married someday, and he'd be an amazing husband, but there was no legal way to do it. I noticed how Josh wanted to have kids someday. How would that be possible? And I remember crying a lot. For Josh, for my other LGBT friends. One of the things that brought me to tears and just pissed me off the most was when my friends who were part of Christian groups would use the language of how, well, you know, homosexuality really is just a choice. And I just wanted to get up in their face. Sometimes I did. There was no finger wagging, I don't think. But I just wanted to like do this and just say, right, so Josh is choosing a life where public affection, marriage, having children are infinitely harder, if not impossible, and wrought with potential injury and harassment, and you think he's choosing this? I suffered with Josh. That compass connected us. And not only that, and here's the thing about suffering with someone, I absolutely believe that God changed me through Josh. To use the language of our Chunk of Change sermon series we're in, that God absolutely metanoia'd me. I'm sure you could take a Greek word and just put ed on the end, right? We can do that. That God changed me, metanoia'd me through this relationship with Josh. Because Josh put a face and a life and a name to something that could have remained a label, a category of people, a political or social issue. I just thank God that I had the chance to learn compassion, to suffer with Josh in my own small way, experiencing the vast suffering that our LGBT folks live with. Not that even comes close to that reality, but at least beginning to feel that. When have you been close enough to someone to learn that they were far more than a label? Your own Josh story. What lessons did you learn? What kind of suffering did you see? We can't see them, we can't know their suffering until we get close enough. And you don't have to be as close as I was with Josh. Like, that was a pretty intimate friendship, but we need to see a face, know a name, hear a story. We can't know what it means to be someone who lives with addiction until we get close enough. We can't know what it means to be a parent for a child with special needs until we get close enough. We can't know what it means to live with chronic pain until we get close enough. We can't understand why a professional football player would take a knee during the national anthem until we get close enough. We can't know the suffering of the aftermath of a hurricane until we get close enough. So how have you metanoia'd through the suffering of someone else? What I want to name in this is that it's in relationship. When someone has a face and a name that we know, this is where we can be changed, in close proximity. Through that compass connection, we live into a posture towards others that we see Jesus embody in every interaction that he had. John Philip Newell talks about this too, where we see life as infinitely precious, where we see our life as just as precious as this one's, this group's, this community's life. To see ourselves in the person, the crowd, to put on the shoes of that person, that country over there. That's what the compassion connection does in us. So there's so much more to say about this, and more that we will say in this month to come, but this is where we begin. And to close, I just want to suggest 3 responses, 3 things. I know, it's kind of ambitious for me. You ready? 3 things. Really, it's ambitious for you if you're going to say yes. But yeah, so 3 things just in response. All right, 1 that's kind of big, 2 a little more manageable, okay? So don't walk away after I tell you the big one. Okay, So this first one, I need to set it up a little bit. So on Wednesday, after the New Bethlehem Day Center closed, I went and had the chance to have a beer and a conversation with Natalia, who's the program director for the New Bethlehem Day Center, which is so great. She's just a fantastic human being, and I enjoyed just getting to know her better. And if you're newer to Salt House, the Day Center is in our basement, and we've said yes to it. It's coming up on 1 year next month that it's been serving families experiencing homelessness during the day, providing services for them. But one of the questions that I asked her was, so is the relationship that Salt House has with New Bethlehem, is this the relationship that you thought it would be? Is this what you would hope for? Really, that's a more important question. Is this what you would hope for? And in her answer, the most telling thing that she said was, I just wish folks from Salt House would come by. And I said, yeah, me too. And she clarified, not just like drop by unannounced all the time, but to show up, to find out ways to be a part of the life there, to volunteer, to spend time with the clients who are there in the day center. So here's the thing. You are here at Salt House, which means you are already a part of the New Bethlehem Day Center. We share a building with them. We share this home with them. And you may be like me, someone with little expertise, little exposure and experience with folks experiencing homelessness. But my friends, we are given this incredible chance to be in close proximity to families experiencing homelessness, to be with their suffering, to let ourselves be changed. And I don't want us to miss that chance. So the first response I offer to you, to seeing with compassion, is to ask, how might you step closer to the clients who come to the New Bethlehem Day Center here in our basement? Also this week on Monday, we hosted a conversation here in this room on homelessness, a chance for the Kirkland community to come and hear how things are going, to hear the facts about homelessness on the Eastside, to understand why we need to build a permanent shelter to serve single women and families experiencing homelessness, and why we at Salt House have said yes to selling land to meet that desperate need. We heard from Catholic Community Services on Monday, the City of Kirkland, the Sophia Way. We heard from the architect who has the preliminary drawings for what this will look like. Kim spoke too. There were about 40 people here in this room, and it was just like a big love fest. You always wonder, there can be a lot of conflict that comes up in those conversations, but it was a lot of love. Folks experiencing homelessness currently are receiving great services, but it's a very piecemeal approach where they have to be in one location to sleep and another one to receive this meal and another one to go over here for case management to put them on trajectory to find housing and jobs. What we're a part of with all of these partners collaborating together will completely change that reality for such good, because it will all be here. And Dan, who was here from our community, he was here on Monday night, as we wrapped things up, he turned to me and says, we're kind of a big deal. He's like, I hate to say it like that. He's like, but really part of something that is a really big deal. And he's right. This collaboration that's happening between faith organizations and city government and the impact that it's going to have, this is what the kingdom of God looks like. Housing folks experiencing homelessness, getting uncomfortable, and stepping towards suffering as we do. So what might it look like for you to take a step closer to all of this, maybe into the day center, whether actually physically showing up there in the space or to support it in another way? How might God work change in you and grow compassion in you to see our brothers and sisters who are experiencing homelessness? I hear you. I'm busy too. I hear you too. I found it hard to make time for this. I think underneath I have my own insecurities and vulnerabilities about showing up. But you guys, like Dan said, this is kind of a big deal. We're already a part of it. So what might you do? What might it look like just to move into closer proximity with these folks? So here's one way. There is on your bulletin insert on the back, very small print. If you can find it, you get a cookie. There's a link that we printed there on the back. It will take you to the online signups for the day center. Every day, an individual or group of people provides dinner for the guests who are there. Most days, there's also a snack needed, which is another volunteer task that you can sign up for. Other supplies and necessities are listed too that you can sign up for. So grab your family, grab a few folks from here and sign up. You don't need to attend a volunteer training to be someone who brings meals or snacks or supplies, but if you do bring a meal, you do get to sit down and eat with the folks too, so it's a great way to connect. You can also go through the volunteer training. Thank you. There's so many folks in this community you already have, and be there for a longer window of time, like a few hours on a day of your choice, helping with what's needed. I was there with Heather a few Sunday afternoons ago, and we just sat and colored with some of the kids. It was awesome and humbling and chaotic, and just put me in touch with my own vulnerability. But it was good. So the day center has been short-staffed in all these areas since school started, and I would just love for them to have the problem of having too many volunteers showing up, right? So you can also find links to all of this through the Salt House app. If you haven't yet, you can download it for free. So that's the big first response I invite you to consider. I know, it's a big one. But really, that's just what God is stirring me into, just how we have been placed in this close proximity to these folks. So how do we actually step into their shoes? Close proximity in this big deal that God is doing in our midst. All right, second and third responses for today are quicker and a little less challenging in most ways, and both of them involve writing. So the second response is to take the pen and paper that you should have received when you came in today, and to let this be a space where you write a prayer. A word or a short phrase that is what you pray for yourself today. What is it that you carry on your heart today? What is the question that you are wondering about? The sadness that you shoulder, the joy that you just want to give thanks for? What is your one prayer today? Here's the thing. Growing in compassion. To do that, we also need to see our own suffering, to move toward it, and not be afraid to name it, to talk to God about it, and let it be prayed for in community. Again, it takes courage. Courage to see even our own suffering. So in a few moments as we finish, we'll sing a song, and that's a chance to just kind of be in that space, write down your prayer, and at the end of that song, we're going to gather up those prayers, and then we are going to pray them out loud, anonymously. And so please write clearly as you write. But as with all things at Salt House, you don't have to write anything down if you don't want to, and you can even turn in a blank piece of paper if you would like to. So the third and final response is to ask the question named in our video, the question that we keep coming back to here at Salt House, the question of God. What are you saying to me? What is God saying to you today? My friends, how is God hooking you, getting your attention, making you mad, making you excited? What is coming up for you, stirring in you? Perhaps from something we've said here, but maybe not even related to what's happening here. It's just happening in this past week in your life right now that you want to name as significant. We call those kairos moments. So name one thing. Then after worship today, take time to write it on one of the painted shapes that we have on the table over here, as well as over by the window. You can see some already hanging. We're just entering into this practice, this discipline of writing down kairos every week when we come here. It can be the question mark of like, God, where are you? I don't know. It can be the continuing unfolding of soccer and my daughter playing soccer and how that's a kairos in my life. So whatever it is, to take time in that discipline, because we want to grow in our ability to hear God and listen closely together. So that's your third and final response, all right? It's a lot. But are you game? Cool. So the band's going to come back up. I invite you as we move through this time just to become connected with your breath again. I invite you to close your eyes. You can hang on to that pen and paper that I